At 4:19 a.m. on March 19, 2025, the silence of the Kursk forest was shattered as Ukraine unleashed a precise HIMARS strike deep inside Russian territory. In just 90 seconds, 3 North Korean Koksan artillery guns recently deployed to reinforce Moscow's weakening front were obliterated before they could fire a single shell. This lightning-fast operation, guided by drones and powered by satellite-linked precision, exposed the fatal vulnerability of static forces in modern warfare. What began as a test of Allied strength between Russia and North Korea ended as a devastating display of Ukraine's evolving deep strike capability. But could this be the moment that redefines the balance of power in the war's third year? Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any other videos. At exactly 4:19 a.m. on March 19, 2025, the stillness of the Kursk forest shattered under the echo of distant engines. Hidden beneath layers of fog and pine canopy, Ukraine's Leica 100 reconnaissance unit, forward deployed from a base near Sumy, was already tracking the faint thermal signatures of a newly established artillery site deep inside Russian territory. Their mission was singular, precise, and time-bound: to locate, identify, and lock onto a North Korean artillery formation that had just been deployed to reinforce Russian forces along the western border. 3 days earlier, nearly 3,000 North Korean soldiers had crossed into Russia via the Veluki railway corridor, bringing with them heavy equipment and long-range weapons. Once integrated with the Russian contingent around Kursk, their presence increased the total North Korean manpower in Russia to over 15,000 troops, an unprecedented deployment since the war began. Among their arsenal were at least 12 Koksan M1 1978 self-propelled guns, each armed with 170mm cannons capable of firing high-explosive shells over 60 kilometers. Their range was sufficient to threaten Ukrainian logistics hubs stretching from Sumy to Pavlivka. Before dawn, 3 of these Koksan batteries were moved into a dense sector of the forest. Russian engineers arranged them in a skewed triangular pattern to reduce the chance of simultaneous destruction in case of air attack. Camouflage nets, steel fragment shields, and anti-drone mesh canopies stretched between vehicles, merging with the dark treetops. It was meant to be a hidden fortress, an illusion of invisibility built deep in Russian soil. Yet before any of these weapons could fire, the illusion was broken. Ukraine struck first. At 4:22 a.m., Leica UAV imagery confirmed 3 distinct artillery signatures in a clearing. Each Koksan was aimed southwest, half covered by netting, with roughly 15 artillerymen conducting reload operations. Critically, the site lacked radar coverage and close-range air defense systems, an open wound waiting for precision fire. The encrypted video feed was transmitted to Ukrainian Artillery Command in Sumy, where analysts quickly reviewed infrared overlays, range grids, and structural geometry. Their conclusion was straightforward: static, unprotected, above-ground targets. Suicide drones were ruled out. The anti-drone mesh risked premature detonation. Instead, the decision came instantly: deploy HIMARS M142 launchers firing M30A1 GMLRS rockets, the ideal munition for striking camouflaged but exposed field targets. Outwardly, the M142 HIMARS resembles a simple military truck. In truth, it is a mobile precision strike system capable of surgical destruction far beyond its scale. High-mobility artillery rocket system is not just a name, it defines an entire combat doctrine built on rapid deployment, precision targeting, and immediate withdrawal. Ukraine has turned HIMARS into the ghost arm of its deep strike warfare, using it to dismantle ammunition depots, artillery bases, and supply lines, without ever exposing its own crews. Each M142 launcher carries up to 6 M30A1 guided rockets, each with a range of 84 kilometers and a circular error probable of less than 3 meters. The M30A1's alternative warhead contains 182,000 preformed tungsten steel fragments that disperse at hypersonic velocity, blanketing an area over 100 meters wide. Upon detonation, it forms a sphere of incandescent metal fragments, an artificial storm of steel capable of reducing armored vehicles and infantry to scorched wreckage. One well-placed rocket can erase a Koksan gun entirely. The weapon's guidance is powered by M-code military GPS, linked directly to both satellite constellations and forward-deployed UAVs. This synchronization allows HIMARS to engage camouflaged or slowly moving targets with near-perfect precision. Its 290 horsepower diesel engine pushes the vehicle to 85 kilometers per hour, enabling Ukraine's signature fire and fade tactic. Once a salvo is fired, the launcher relocates in under 2 minutes, evading counter-battery radar and loitering munitions. On the battlefield, HIMARS is not merely a weapon, it is a phantom, silent, precise, unpredictable. At 4:25 a.m., inside the tactical operations room of Ukraine's 27th Artillery Brigade, a red marker appeared on the digital map: high-value target confirmed. Within 3 minutes, an M142 launcher was activated from standby. From a hidden position deep in the Sumy Forest, the fire command was issued through a frequency-hopping UHF channel designed to evade Russian interception and jamming. The HIMARS switched into semi-automatic fire mode. Pod number 1 rotated to bearing 68.3 degrees northeast. Elevation set to 53 degrees, calculated for a high-arc semi-ballistic flight path. Weather data uploaded in real time. Southeast wind, 4 meters per second. Temperature, 2 Celsius, ideal for trajectory stability and minimal drift. Target lock confirmed in just 3.6 seconds. At precisely 4:26:15 a.m., the first M30A1 rocket launched. A roar ripped through the forest, the missile slicing upward through fog at blistering speed. Within 3 seconds, it reached 2,700 kilometers per hour, climbing to 11,000 meters above the rolling hills of Chernihiv Oblast. Russian radar never saw it. The M30A1 followed a high-arc, quasi-ballistic path, ascending sharply, then diving vertically. This trajectory minimized interception windows and maximized kinetic precision. At 6,500 meters, the reconnaissance drone maintained a continuous satellite-linked targeting feed, refreshing every 2 seconds. The UAV itself, a lightweight M-wing tactical model with a radar cross-section of just 0.05 square meters, roughly equal to a seabird, remained invisible to Russian Podlet K1 and 35 ZR-6M early warning radars. Its burst mode data transmission could upload an entire targeting sequence in under 1 second, ensuring the missile's course corrections were precise to the meter. At 4:26:50 a.m., the rocket reached its apex altitude, 21,400 meters. Then it pitched downward, gravity becoming its final propellant. The M30A1 plunged at 2,500 kilometers per hour, descending almost vertically onto the forest clearing below. The warhead detonated mid-air, releasing its 182,000 tungsten fragments in a storm of hypervelocity steel. The first target, an ammunition truck, erupted in a 10-meter fireball. The nearest Koksan gun was torn open, barrel split, chassis twisted beyond recognition. Its fire control optics and diesel engine were shredded in an instant. 7 North Korean crewmen died where they stood. At 4:27:07 a.m., the second rocket struck the western battery. Though it missed by 3 meters, the airburst covered the entire emplacement. One tungsten shard pierced the ammo loader. Another shattered the scope and optical housing. The rear track snapped from its axle. 2 artillerymen were repositioning the barrel. One killed instantly, the other crawling into a trench before disappearing in smoke. The second gun was rendered completely inoperable. At 4:27:50 a.m., the third rocket struck the resupply truck beside the final Koksan. The blast snapped its support axle, flipping the gun on its side. The breech tore open. The elevation system failed. 5 crewmen died instantly. One survivor staggered toward the woods but collapsed moments later, hit by a steel fragment in the leg. In just 90 seconds, the battlefield fell silent. 3 rockets, 3 targets destroyed. A full North Korean artillery unit erased at the cost of less than $500,000, inflicting over 10 million in losses. Moments later, all communications from the site ceased. Russian command west of Kursk initially reported a technical fault, unaware the entire battery no longer existed. Within minutes, UAV reconnaissance confirmed the reality. 3 burning husks and no survivors. Orlan 10 drones and emergency recovery teams were scrambled, but by the time they arrived, HIMARS had already vanished, leaving behind nothing but fire, silence, and a cratered memory. The forest of Kursk smoldered in silence. In less than 2 minutes, an entire artillery formation had been erased from existence. Flames still licked the broken chassis of the Koksan guns, and thick smoke curled above the trees, visible for kilometers in every direction. Ukrainian reconnaissance drones circled at high altitude, capturing the aftermath in real time. The infrared feed showed no movement, no surviving signatures, only molten steel and scattered debris glowing against the cold terrain. At Russian forward command posts, confusion spread faster than the flames. Communication officers monitoring the North Korean artillery network noticed abrupt signal loss across all 3 nodes. At first, commanders suspected jamming or local power failure. Within minutes, however, emergency channels began receiving distorted telemetry, then silence. When the first Orlan 10 reconnaissance drone reached the grid square at 4:38 a.m., the truth appeared on their screens. 3 burned-out wrecks, supply trucks reduced to ashes, and not a single human figure moving among them. The strike was as surgical as it was devastating. 3 M30A1 rockets, costing a fraction of a modern tank, had inflicted catastrophic losses, both material and psychological. What was meant to be a show of new allied strength between Russia and North Korea had, in a single night, turned into a symbol of vulnerability. The HIMARS system had not merely destroyed hardware, it had annihilated confidence. This was the 3rd successful elimination of Koksan artillery units in under 2 weeks. Russian engineers had believed that camouflage nets and layered anti-drone barriers could hide heavy artillery deep in forest cover. The Kursk strike proved otherwise. Precision satellites and low-visibility drones rendered terrain, distance, and darkness meaningless. Every static position was a potential target. Every ignition of an engine, a detectable event in the electromagnetic spectrum. Following the incident, Russia immediately ordered a suspension of all long-range artillery operations within the Kursk sector. Reinforcement convoys from Velyky were halted. Newly arrived North Korean batteries were diverted east toward Belgorod and Voronezh, areas equipped with stronger electronic warfare coverage. The redeployment delayed Moscow's broader plan to open sustained long-range bombardment against Sumy and Pavlivka, granting Ukraine valuable breathing space along the front. From a tactical standpoint, the operation underscored the lethal synergy between reconnaissance and precision fire. The Leica 100 unit had acted as an invisible eye, maintaining persistent observation without emitting detectable signals. Once coordinates were verified, the HIMARS network transformed that observation into instantaneous execution. The chain from target acquisition to impact had taken barely 7 minutes. It was a demonstration of modern asymmetric warfare at its purest, intelligence fused seamlessly with firepower. Technically, the strike illustrated how Ukraine has evolved from reactive defense to proactive disruption. HIMARS units were no longer simply counter-battery tools. They were instruments of preemption. Their effectiveness depended not on volume but on synchronization, exploiting every gap in the opponent's radar and EW coverage. Russia's artillery doctrine, built around massed fires and static fire bases, struggled to adapt. The Kursk incident proved that in an environment dominated by drones and satellite data, immobility was death. The psychological effect was equally severe. Reports from surviving Russian and North Korean support teams described widespread shock and hesitation. North Korean crews, trained for fixed-fire operations under centralized command, were unprepared for an enemy capable of striking so fast and vanishing before a response could even be coordinated. In subsequent days, reconnaissance intercepted radio chatter among North Korean detachments near Kursk and Belgorod expressing open fear of ghost rockets, a reference to HIMARS strikes that arrive without radar warning or engine sound. The command response in Moscow was swift but uncertain. An internal investigation identified 3 critical failures. First, a lack of active counter-battery radar in the engagement zone. Second, inadequate signal jamming against Ukrainian UAV uplinks. And third, an over-reliance on forest concealment rather than active mobility. In truth, none of these measures could have prevented the strike. The HIMARS UAV kill chain was too fast, too integrated, and too modular to intercept with Cold War-era systems. For North Korea, the losses were humiliating. Their Koksan M1978 guns, once paraded as symbols of national firepower, had been obliterated before firing a single shell in combat. Internal communication within the Korean People's Army demanded emergency reviews of deployment protocol and coordination with Russian advisors. But the damage was already done. The photographs of incinerated Koksans, captured by Ukrainian drones and quietly leaked to Western intelligence channels, became a case study in modern artillery vulnerability. By sunrise, Ukrainian command centers had already debriefed the mission. The post-strike telemetry showed every rocket landed within a 3-meter radius of its assigned coordinates. Weather conditions, wind vectors, and satellite sync had all aligned perfectly. It was, by military standards, a flawless execution. The entire engagement, from initial detection to final detonation, lasted just over 7 minutes, with the active firing window barely exceeding 90 seconds. The data was preserved for future operational planning and simulation training for other artillery brigades. The success also carried a message beyond the battlefield. To the Ukrainian soldiers monitoring the screens that night, it reaffirmed that precision outweighed quantity. HIMARS had once again proven itself as the decisive tool for deep strike warfare. To Russian commanders, the same event represented a deepening crisis. Each new reinforcement wave became a liability. Each static artillery site a beacon inviting destruction. Strategically, the Kursk strike marked a turning point in the Russia-North Korea collaboration. It was intended to show a united front against Ukrainian advances. Instead, it exposed the fragility of multinational coordination under fire. The imported manpower, 15,000 North Korean soldiers, was meant to restore balance to Russia's depleted artillery corps. Instead, they became new targets on an ever-growing Ukrainian kill map. The destruction of the Koksan batteries had immediate consequences. Russian field artillery near the Kursk front was forced to relocate every 12 hours to avoid detection. This constant movement reduced firing efficiency, strained fuel reserves, and increased logistical burden. Supply routes that once carried ammunition began diverting toward refueling operations. Each HIMARS launch imposed not only physical damage but operational paralysis. In the broader context of the war now entering its 3rd year, the event underscored a profound shift. Russia still possessed numerical superiority in artillery and armor, but Ukraine had mastered the art of tempo warfare, striking faster, adapting faster, and vanishing before retaliation. Each high-precision strike served both as a tactical blow and a strategic signal that speed, intelligence, and precision had replaced mass volume and intimidation. By the end of March 2025, each HIMARS units had executed over a dozen deep strike missions targeting supply hubs, radar stations, and heavy artillery across western Russia. The Kursk operation became the defining symbol of that campaign, clean, decisive, and executed with near-clinical precision. It was warfare reduced to mathematics and timing, where seconds mattered more than size, and data outmatched brute force. The question hanging over Moscow was no longer whether Ukraine could reach inside Russian territory. That had been answered. The real question now was, how often and how deeply would they strike next? For North Korea, another question loomed darker still. Had their intervention changed the course of the war, or merely offered new targets to an adversary who no longer needed to cross the border to deliver destruction? As the last flames in Kursk forest died away, the echo of that 90-second barrage lingered far longer in the halls of Russian command, in the fears of North Korean soldiers, and in the strategic calculus of every army watching this new age of precision warfare unfold.